If you would, go ahead and open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 27. 1 Samuel chapter 27. It's a shorter chapter, and you might get a shorter sermon. I don't know. Everybody's like, I don't know. Empty promises on that one. Have you ever heard the story of the little boy that was sitting in services, and it was his first time going. He was going with a family member, and first time going to services, and he was asking all the things like, what are we doing now? What are we doing with this? And so the Lord's Supper came up. Well, what is this about? So the man is explaining all the things about the Lord's Supper, and then he's asking about the singing, the praying, all the things that are going on. And when the preacher got up to preach, he took his watch off and he sat it up on the podium, and he goes, well, what does that mean? And he said, absolutely nothing. So, 1 Samuel 27. Let's look at this together. There's several little moving parts to this, and we'll discuss them as we go. But let's look at the first few verses. David flees to Gath. Now, if you remember back what we were talking about last week, in chapter 26, David goes into the camp with another soldier, and they take a cruse of water from Saul's head, and they take his spear, and then they go outside of the camp and they yell back to Saul, and they have a discourse with Saul. Saul, repents yet again to David, and says that he's in the wrong for doing all this. But this is not Saul is not a genuine person. He is never really sorry here. He just is sorry he gets caught, or he's sorry in the moment, but it doesn't last very long. There's some people that have ventured to say, and I don't go this far, people venture to say that Saul has some kind of mental problem that would cause him to do this. You can't prove any of that. So I'm not willing to say that. Is he very finicky? Yeah, absolutely. Is he again? He's not genuine. Does he change his mind at the drop of the hat? Yeah. Does his emotions change at the drop of a hat? Absolutely. Yeah. But this comes with someone who's just unstable, just in general, and that happens all the time with various people. But look at verses 1 through 4. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. So this is after Saul has, again repented. So David says, okay, I don't believe this. So he says, hey, I'm now going to perish one day by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me than that I should escape into the land of Philistines, and Saul will despair of me to seek me any more in all the borders of Israel. So shall I escape out of his hand. Now, if you go back and you look a few verses back, David calls out to Saul and says, look, if you kick me out of the land, basically if the people are speaking against me and saying that I'm doing something that I'm not, then they are in the wrong, because they're asking me to go and to serve other gods. In essence, he has to go live in a foreign land and be amongst heathen. And so that's the thought process. We mentioned that a little bit last time. Well, now he actually has to go and do that. He realizes this is not going to end well. Saul is always going to be after me. But we've already mentioned this in the context of 1 Samuel, where the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, David realizes that and says, you know what? If I go and live in a foreign land, then Saul's not going to pursue me. He's not going to be hunting after me. And so he goes, and if he goes into the land of the Philistines, and this is, remember, what is it that Saul said that he would do throughout his life? The Bible records it. Saul is going to be at war with the Philistines his entire kingship. And so David goes into the land of the Philistines. That's his plan. So verse 2. And David arose and passed over, he and his 600 men that were with him, unto Achish the son of Maoch, king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish in Gath, he and his men, every man with his household, even David, with his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. Now, you start thinking about some pretty famous people from Gath. Can you think of one famous person from Gath? Yeah, you're shaking your head. It's Goliath. The very first thing that you see is David fights Goliath in chapter 17, and now he's going to go into Gath. Now, you got to think about that for a second. I would think maybe this is not the best kind of a setup, but yet, he goes on anyway. So he goes into Gath, and then let's look at verses 5 through 7. David is going to receive land from Achish. And David said unto Achish, If now I have found favor in thine eyes, let them give me a place in one of the cities in the country that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day, wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And the number of the days that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months. Now, a couple of things to mention. We've seen this phrase a couple of times, and I meant to mention this already. But when the phrase that to this day, that sometimes people get confused by that, and they'll think, even today, to this day? No, it's to the day of the writing of this. Now, there may be a prophecy of something that has happened up unto this day, which there are, but it is at the time of this writing that this is being spoken of. All right. Also, so he goes and he says, hey, look, I don't need to live in the land up here where the king dwells. I don't need a place up here in the city, in the palace, or anything like that. Just give me a place in the outer parts, in the kind of the countryside here. And I think there's probably some significance to this because we're about to see that David is going to do something that he doesn't want prying eyes to see. And so David, I'm sure that's the whole reason behind this. Of course, there might be some other reasons. You might have other people checking in on you if you're in the city. You might have, spies spying on you rather constantly, being that close to the king. There could be a number of reasons why David would not want to be in the city with the king. But moving on, he goes and he gets Ziklag, and Ziklag, again, it is a part of the inheritance of the kings from then on out. Verse 8, we're going to see some military exploits here, and this is why I think David primarily does not want to be in the city, because he's going to do stuff like this. Look at verse 8 and following with me. And David and his men went up and made a raid upon the Geshurites and the Girzites and the Amalekites, for those nations were the inhabitants of the land who were of old, as thou goest to Shur, even unto the land of Egypt. And David smote the land, and saved neither man nor woman alive, and took away the sheep and the oxen, and the donkeys and the camels and the apparel, and he returned and came to Achish. And so what is he doing? He's going out, and he is utterly destroying people. Does that sound familiar? What is it that they were supposed to do when they came into the land of Canaan? They were to utterly destroy people. They were to go to these lands, and they were to kill everything. Everybody and everything. And yet that's part of the problem that Saul has. When Saul was told to go and to destroy some people, he comes back with a king. And yet David is going out and he is utterly destroying people. Now, people would look at this and go, well, this is kind of harsh, but this is the same thing that's been going on before. There's nothing different here. So he's going out and he is utterly destroying these people. Now, here's a problem, though. You see what the problem is already? Well, what's the problem with David doing this? David is killing people in the land that he is living, people who he's now allied himself with. Now, nobody, you think about this in conjunction with God, not a big deal. But in conjunction with the king, well, that's probably a big deal, right? Well, it is a big deal. Matter of fact, let's look at the next verse. Verse 10. Achish questions David. And Achish said, against whom have you made a raid today? And David said, against the south of Judah, and against the south of the Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites, all people and friends of God. So what does he do? He goes out, he destroys the enemies of God, and then what does he do to Achish? He lies. He lies and says something else. Look at this, verses 11 and 12. David saved neither man nor woman alive to bring them to Gath, saying, lest they should tell of us, saying, so did David, and so hath been his manner all the while he hath dwelt in the country of the Philistines. And Achish believed David, saying, he hath made his people Israel utterly to abhor him. Therefore he shall be my servant forever. And so what does he do? He says, look, I'm going in. I'm killing the people that I used to be friends with. I used to be a part of these groups. We used to be allies with some of these people. And he says, I've gone and I've destroyed them, yet he is really destroying people in the own land that he is dwelling. Now, he has done something that people want to justify. They'll look at this and they'll go, well, when there's war, you just go ahead and you lie and you do all this stuff and you trick people, and they'll use David as an example for that. It's never, ever been okay to lie. Never. Now, has God used lying? We've mentioned this already with Rahab. You know, what did she do? She lied, sent the men another way, and saved the spies. But later on, when you look at the Hall of Faith in Hebrews, when you look at that, what is said about her? It says that she was justified by faith in that she lied? No. She's justified in her faith in that she sent the men away. Now, the whole idea is that she didn't know any better. She's just doing what she can do. She didn't know any better. She was not a child of God. But yet, even at that, here you have David. And David is doing the same thing. Now, we have already in this study talked about lying and how lying is not good. David has already lied before, and you can't justify lying. Lying is just wrong. But I want to add to it this thought. If you look at Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, it says, let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth. But the idea is, but such as befitting to God, the idea there. But let no corrupt speech proceed out of the mouth. And now, we talk about that, and what do we talk about with corrupt speech? Well, a lot of times we'll say, you shouldn't use foul language. That is an application of that. But that idea of corrupt speech is a broad term. And we could lump lying in there too. Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth. All the things that are pertaining to God, we deal well with God. We try to obey God. We do everything we can to obey God. But David here, he is not being obedient in this regard. But he is just flat out lying, and there is just no excuse. We can't. There are other times when David does things, and we want to excuse his behavior. But listen, there is no excuse for his behavior with Bathsheba. There's just no excuse. He did something wrong. Now, why is it that I have put so much emphasis on this? The reason that I'm putting emphasis on this is so that we know that we can't look to every aspect of a person's life and go, oh, okay, we're gonna do exactly the way that he did. And that's exactly what we've talked about even on Wednesday nights with the Zealots. What did the Zealots do? They looked to some of the violent things that were done under the old covenant, and they said, this is what we do. We need to be violent. We need to go out, and we need to fight people. Now, concerning reputation and following after somebody, what are we to do? Paul says what? Imitate me how? As I imitate Christ. You know what? We need to follow after somebody when they're doing the right thing, not when they're doing the wrong thing. If we were to do that, we'd find ourselves in all kinds of crazy scenarios. We'd find ourselves even in the darkest part of our lives because we're just following after people and doing what they do. You don't follow people unless they're following God. That's what we need to think about. Don't follow people. Don't go, oh, well, so-and-so's doing it. If they're doing it, well, maybe they're better than me. And so, then I can do it. And people oftentimes look at David and go, well, David was called a man after God's own heart. And so when he does something bad, well, then I guess we can do that too. But that's not the right attitude. David has done some bad things. There's no justification for it. You just have to realize David has done wrong. And we just need to think about this too. While David is a man of God, David is also a man. And he's not perfect. And he is operating on the information that he's got. And so, all that being said, we cannot justify a lie. I want to bring up one more thought for our application, and that is this. I've oftentimes wondered how stories in the Bible would have ended if people showed a little more faith. There is a little bit of a lack of faith here if you think about it. He doesn't know that Saul is going to kill him, but what does he say? Oh, well, surely I'm going to die at the hand of Saul. What do you mean? You're the anointed king, okay? God has given you that. God told you that you're going to be king. You think Saul's going to kill you? God is going to deliver you in some way. You think about the faith that David had in 1 Samuel 17 facing off before Goliath. What if he applied that faith right now and said, you know what? God is going to protect me. But this happens so many times in Scripture. You think back to Abraham getting a promise that his seed was going to bless the earth, and that the number of it could not be counted. All this stuff. And yet they don't even have one child, right? And so what do? They take matters into their own hands. And what ends up happening then? When they go and Sarah gives him her handmaid as a concubine, it causes even more problems. What would have happened if they didn't do that? If they didn't try to take matters into their own hands? Think about that with David here. I don't know what could have happened, but surely the story could be much different here. That if David put his faith a little bit more in God. I know we don't like hearing that because David is a man after God's own heart. But you have to admit that there is a little lack of faith right here in this chapter. And he's running from Saul. I get it. If you are running from somebody, you're probably not thinking straight, and that's probably the whole thought process here. But I just kind of wish that David put a little bit more faith in God right at this moment. And could be a better example to all of us, so we can look back and go, what we do? We could imitate David as he is being a man after God's own heart right here. But you know what I think about also with David? David is a man after God's own heart. He repents when he is told that he's wrong, and that's the way that we ought to be. We ought to be people that will take care of our sin, and you have an opportunity to do that right now. If you have sin in your life and you need to make things right, then you can do that. If you've not yet become a child of God, this is your opportunity. Hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. And if you are, then you can make things right if you haven't been living right. You can do that right now. The invitation is yours. Please come as we stand and as we sing.